on the podcast, we're joined by Dr. Tisha, a clinical psychologist and former chief wellbeing officer who has spent over 15 years helping clinicians and leaders navigate the complexities of workplace wellbeing. Tisha has a wealth of experience in addressing burnout and creating systemic change in high-pressure environments. Her insights are practical, actionable, and deeply relevant not just for healthcare but for anyone seeking to foster mental health and resilience in their workplace. We'll dive into strategies for supporting yourself and others, shifting workplace culture, and understanding what truly drives burnout. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's okay. Can we start with your journey and how you got into what you do now?
Sure. So I became a chief wellbeing officer, which is I'm still in that role for a large healthcare system, mostly because I myself was experiencing burnout in my role as a leader and found that I needed to get out, that burnout was not a life that I wanted to live. And when I reached out to a colleague to let him know that I was very burnt out, my staff was burnt out, did he have any recommendations and did he know of any jobs that were opening? He gave me some recommendations around how to help burnout with my staff, but also let me know about this chief wellbeing officer position that was new to our facility. So I've been in that role for several years now. And then I recently, last year, started my own company where I provide consultation to healthcare systems and leaders around how do you create a culture of well-being and thriving, and how do you address burnout in your organization?
Yeah. Have you always been in the healthcare space?
I have. So I've been a clinical psychologist for 16 years. I've been doing clinical practice for almost 20 years now, and most of my work has been providing trauma therapy to veterans and for a few years in community mental health. But that's been the bulk of my work. And we know that mental health providers have high levels of burnout because there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into providing therapy. And that's doubly so for individuals that do trauma work. So that healthcare is the world I've been in for many years now.
Yeah. I'm much the same, working in like allied health, so slightly different.
Very
but
cool.
I understand that a lot of clinicians only work for a few years and then they change jobs maybe to like a different private practice because they just get burnt out, and it's just a bit of a cycle.
Yeah, that's very true. Burnout has very high rates in healthcare, especially managed care when you're working in a big system or you're working in an organization that's really driven by metrics or works with insurance companies and things like that. So yeah, that has been where we see a lot of people leave. We've seen since COVID a lot of people leave healthcare for actually other industries, or they leave and they do private practice and things like that. So they have a more manageable workload, a better life, work-life integration and things like that.
Yeah. And when you were burnt out, what were the things that you noticed to identify that?
Yeah, so emotional and physical exhaustion that was one of the biggest indicators for me, that no matter how much sleep I got, no matter how much time I took off, no matter how many vacations I took, I just felt like my cup was continually empty. And there was no amount of catching up on sleep or rest that helped me feel like I was getting back to baseline. So many times burnt out, I think, is a little bit overused of a term. I think it's a very hot term right now and people use it a lot. There's a difference between stress at work, where you're like, that was a stressful week, but I have the weekend and I'm ready to get back at it again on Monday. Or it's stressful because we're doing this big project and I know there's an end in sight and then we'll have some breathing room after it. Burnout is with that physical exhaustion. It's just this perpetual exhaustion. You feel like bone deep tiredness, and that was the first sign for me. I also found that I was feeling pretty cynical towards other people. I went into mental health and became a psychologist because I enjoy working with people. I have a lot of empathy, and so to go from being this very empathetic person to going to this place of just when people would come to me, I'd be like, why are you wasting my time? Or just like, okay, can we get out of this interaction as quickly as possible? And I knew that was not who I am as a person. So that was a flag to me that something was not right. And then the third indication was just feeling like I wasn't as effective in my job as I used to be. And again, I did all the schooling to become a psychologist because I find the work really meaningful, and I was really losing that sense of meaning and purpose in my work. I still think I was able to provide good clinical care and to provide support to my team, but I felt like my effectiveness in doing that was decreasing. So those were kind of the three things. And just being cranky all the time, people in my life would be like, there's this little gray cloud following you everywhere. What's going on? And that to me was like, okay, like something's got to give.
Yeah, so it starts affecting your personal life as well.
Totally.
Yeah. Did you feel pressure as a psychologist that you were supposed to be on top of that in a way, or be able to fix it on your own?
Absolutely. And I will tell you what I've learned since becoming a chief wellbeing officer. Absolutely. I'm working with people who are coming to me and they're telling me I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm depressed. And so much of my work is helping people get to a place where they're able to have better well-being and they're better able to live lives that are meaningful to them. And so absolutely. I'm like, we're the people that people come to when they're burnt out to say, how do I get out of this cycle of burnout? So I had a lot of shame around not being able to figure it out myself and not, quote unquote, fix myself. And so since I've moved into this role where I'm really looking at burnout from, the research perspective and what we know about it as an occupational syndrome, according to the ICD and the World Health Organization, is that burnout is something we feel as individuals, but it's really the consequence of how organizations run. Like there may be things that we can do in our own lives to address our burnout, like taking care of ourselves, taking time off, spending time nurturing other aspects of our identities. But if we work in a company or an organization or in a culture that's toxic or workload is too much, where you're not getting support for your well-being, or there's stigma around talking about well-being and mental health, people will become burnt out. And so now knowing that, I'm like, oh, we put so much shame on people when we're like, oh, you're burnt out, like it's a weakness, when in fact it's a consequence of the organization or the kind of the work setting that they're in, or whatever the setting may be. It could be caregiving, it could be, so many different types of roles people can take on where they're feeling burnt out, where it's really the situation they're in that drives the burnout, not who that person is or a personal weakness.
Yeah. And with that being said, do you think staying in a workplace like that, you would be able to overcome it? Or do you think you'd have to leave if there were no workplace changes?
Great question. So there are 3 things that can really help address burnout. The first is the culture's got to change. The culture has to be one that centers well-being. It behooves organizations to support their staff, because when staff show up and they're in a good place emotionally, mentally, psychologically, they're going to perform really well. And your organization is only going to benefit from that. So you need to have a culture where you're saying, yes, we need to, as a company, achieve our mission, but we got to take care of the people doing the work or we're not going to be able to do that. So that's the first piece. Like, are we really centering well-being and employee engagement in our organization? So I know I'm talking a lot about like bigger systems because that's the world I live in, but this can really apply in any setting. The second is, are we giving people the resources they need to do their job? And if people feel like they have what they need, they have the support, they have the tools, they have resources, they have the staffing, again, people are going to succeed. The third ingredient is personal resilience. So I hope when people listen to this episode, they're not hearing me say, well, burnout is driven by things around you. There's nothing you can do. That's definitely not what I'm saying. We have the ability to cultivate our personal resilience, and doing that through our own practices and what we do on a day-to-day basis for ourselves. But if we're existing in an organization that isn't supporting us, it's really hard to remain resilient. I've seen incredibly resilient people. I think healthcare is a really good example where like the people that go into healthcare are already really robust humans. They're very resilient humans, and they get ground down by the system. So I think there comes a tipping point where people have to say, I've thrown as much energy as I can into being resilient, and I'm still burnt out. That may be a signal that like something's got to give, and I don't think it's me. I think it's me stepping away from this organization I'm in, or this job I'm in, or this role I've taken on, or whatever that looks like.
Yeah. I guess I have two questions from that. The first one would be, do you have any strategies on how someone can work on building their resilience if they feel like they're not quite where they want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody knows themselves in terms of what well-being looks like for them, but I would encourage people to consider resilience and well-being as being multidimensional. So I'm not just talking about physical well-being, eating well, sleeping, drinking lots of water, all those things, but attending to your spiritual well-being, your psychological well-being, your financial well-being, your social well-being. And what we find when people are burnt out, they start to kind of recede or pull away from people in their lives, their social circles, or they stop attending to the other parts of their lives that are really important to them. Like, I'm too tired to maybe go to church or to spend time with my family or to engage in the hobbies I used to enjoy. So really, like, again, really tending to those different parts of your life that are important to you, because what we tend to do when we're burnt out is we double down and put all our energy into work because we're like, if I just work harder, The other things, there's a lot out there around things like gratitude practice. It's not just about being grateful, but really reflecting on things in your life that bring you joy, and those can be little moments. And then the other is really looking at your sphere of control. What are the things in my life that I have control over? So maybe I can't change the organization I'm in, but I can connect with my colleagues in a way that's meaningful to me. I can make sure if it's a cubicle or an office, excuse me, that I'm setting it up in a way that like is a calming environment. Or maybe I advocate to my leadership for changes, or I join a local organization or a national organization that's lobbying for changes in my industry. So I think things like that, where people are translating their frustration and their burnout into actionable items. So it feels like I'm not just stewing, I'm committing energy to these things.
Yeah. And from a psychology perspective, what are your thoughts on journaling and physically writing things down on paper? Would you say it's helpful?
Yeah. I will say we use that often in therapy, and I think some people love journaling. I think some people have an aversion to writing. Maybe it's related to school and it was an aversive experience. But in my work with not only therapy clients, but also in working with people in my organization, journaling is one very healing way where people can kind of put down on paper what they're experiencing and express it in a way that feels cathartic and healthy. So absolutely, I think there's such great benefit to journaling.
Yeah, I find benefit. I don't do it enough, but when I do, I think it's really helpful. Even if I don't read it, like just read it maybe once and then just shut the book and not look at it.
Yeah, it's like you're getting it out. You're getting it out on paper, and that can oftentimes, or if you're typing, it can oftentimes feel less heavy when you've done that. Yeah, for sure.
And how are ways that someone can identify that they're in a toxic workplace and they do need to leave and possibly get out to a different one?
So I think when people are trying to determine if their work is a toxic workplace, if it's something about the place that they work, checking in with what their burnout level, I think, is the first really important thing. Is this just a period of stress related to things that are going on at work, but overall you feel like you enjoy what you do, you enjoy the people you work with? Or is it feeling like some of those experiences I talked about earlier, where you're exhausted, you feel cranky, maybe you just feel like you're not getting along with people in your life, and when Sunday night rolls around, you're kind of really having some concerns about going to work in the morning. So I think those are some questions to ask yourself. And also, Do you feel like the good days at work outnumber the bad days, or is it the other way around? And why is that? So sometimes it can be situational factors like the commute, or it could be the pay, where people say, I really love what I do, but it's just not allowing me to, live, as I would like to. And the cost of living where I'm at is just, I'm not making it with the salary I have. Or, is it really truly the situation that you work in? Do you feel like you're not getting along with people at work, or you're not really wanting to engage in work, or the work you're doing doesn't really feel meaningful and important to you? And then sometimes there can be this feeling of like a mismatch of values too in the work that you're doing. And so asking yourself those questions. But I think the biggest question for myself was, are the good days outweighing the bad? And it got to a point where I was like, I feel like the bad days are outweighing the good.
Yeah. And then did you feel like once you'd identified that, did you still feel stuck and frozen in terms of, okay, like I've identified this, but I don't know where to go or what to do? Or you feel, I guess, nervous because you're comfortable in what you're currently doing and you're familiar?
Absolutely. I think it can be so scary to leave what you know, even if you're at the point of, I can't go on this way anymore. This is just taking a toll on my life. And I do think humans are creatures of habit. We like what we know, we're scared of what we don't. And so making that leap was very scary for me. And I think it came down to reflecting on the fact that I've definitely had failures in my life. I've definitely had things not go the way that I wanted to do, but I always landed on my feet. And most people, when they make a big change, it works out. Maybe it doesn't work out exactly how you want it to. It doesn't go as smoothly as you want to, but usually when people leave and things are pretty bad, they're like, I'm really happy I made that decision. That's how it was for me, even though it was so scary to leave something that I knew. And even just starting my business in the fall, like it's still in baby stages, and I still have a lot of fear around it because I'm learning so much and what it means to run a business, but it's been a very good shift. And I think that there's, when we're willing to see what's on the other side of that fear, there can be really good things.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like you said as well, like asking yourself, if I'm still here in 5 years' time, will I be happy or will I hate the thought of that? And if that's the case, then I think seeing what's on the other side is still going to be better than that answer of staying there.
Definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah. And in terms of going into workplaces and putting into strategies or wellness programs, where do you think a lot of businesses feel short with their employees?
I think a lot of businesses don't necessarily listen to what their employees need. I've worked with many leaders, and they often say, well, if I think if we just bring in some mindfulness, or if we just, give them some self-help or some self-care tools, that'll really be helpful. And I fell into that trap too, which is why I said when I became a chief wellbeing officer, I was like, oh, that is telling people to be more resilient is actually a bit of a slap in the face. So I think that organizations feel like they've got it figured out without actually asking their staff, what is it that you need? And it can be pretty simple things like, could we have less meetings? Could we, explore flexible work tours or, work schedules? Could we explore telework? That might be a big one. Some organizations may be like, that is not something we can offer. Or what is it that you need? Is it, a couple extra fridges in the staff room so everybody can fit their lunch, or a better working AC? So again, I think that there are just things that staff will tell their leaders what they need because they're thinking about it every day when they're at work. And it can be really minor things, or like, this process we have is really inefficient. If we did it this way, it would be quicker. And, people that are not doing the work day to day may not know about those inefficiencies and those frustrations, but their staff know because they're doing it every day, and they've probably come up with some pretty good solutions, but don't have the authority to put them into place. So I would summarize by saying, I think organizations are like, no, we've got this figured out, instead of going to the people that are experiencing burnout and saying, like, what is it that you need? And what is it that maybe things we can't give you, but let's focus on the things we can.
Yeah. Have you seen any trends in specific things that you've noticed are positive changes?
Yeah, I think some include empowering staff to make changes within their immediate work environment. So saying, hey, staff, we can't change parking, we can't change larger system things, but what are the things you do on a day-to-day basis that we can get rid of because they don't really add any value, or the value they add is so minimal that, like, why are we even doing it? So empowering staff to make those changes or to identify the issues and then getting leadership support to allow staff to make the changes. That has been really successful in terms of creating a culture where people are like, oh, this wasn't working well, or this was driving my burnout. I brought it up and we did something about it. So I'm going to keep bringing things up. And so that's less of a technique and more of just like a cultural change, like encouraging people to talk about the things that are really frustrating at work. Workload is a big one. That's the one I hear the most from people. Like, even with the advent of AI and technology and technological advances and things like that, just people's workloads are going up in every industry. But there's not this commensurate, let's give you more time or more staff to do it. And so I think if organizations really took a hard look at the amount of work they give their employees and right-sized it and said, how do we really, make it such that we're giving people the right amount of work, and knowing that there's going to be differences. There are going to be some really top performers that can maybe take on a little bit more. And of course, you need to have like performance expectations and all those things. But I think when healthcare or any organization is able to adjust workload to a truly reasonable level, that's where people are like, okay, I feel like I'm succeeding at work versus like always behind. I'm always catching up because I'm always behind.
Yeah, so setting realistic goals with workload.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's important. If employees, I guess from the flip end, I guess the workplace isn't communicating and opening the floor for employees to voice their feedback, how is a way that an employee can communicate with their employer about maybe some changes that they've thought of?
That's tricky. Yeah, if you don't have leadership that's eliciting that, I think it depends on, are you working for an organization that may not be coming to you directly and asking, but have avenues where you could bring things up? Like, is there an employee survey every year where you can provide that feedback? Are there other anonymous ways in which you can kind of channel up concerns or recommendations or thoughts you have? So I think that's one like very structured way you can do it. But oftentimes organizations will have open forums where employees can talk with leadership and bring up concerns, like a town hall. That's what we call them in the US, where like companies will kind of open the floor for people. Okay.
Yeah.
Places, things like that, like coffee with leadership, drop in and share what's going on. Some organizations have leaders that will just kind of drop into different departments and ask, like, how are things going? So I think those are things that people can do, and especially if there's an employee survey, that people have access to, really utilizing that. Also sharing with your supervisor. So if you don't feel like you have a voice, tell your supervisor so that they can tell their supervisor, who can tell leadership, like, this is a problem. Because once they hear from many people, like, oh, this is causing people to leave, this is impacting people's ability to do their jobs, they'll make the change. But it's, again, I think if there's trust that if you bring things up, things will get done, or that you won't be retaliated against, then people will just stay quiet. And that is how it is in some organizations, where people are like, you don't stick your head up, you just stay quiet. And that's, again, where you need to ask yourself, is that the kind of organization I want to work for? And if not, it's probably going to drive your burnout. Is like, are there other organizations where you feel like, oh, I can bring things up and that's actually celebrated or applauded?
Yeah. I think a lot of businesses as well want to improve the business and like keep the employee retention, because staff turnover is expensive as well from a business perspective. So I think a lot of the times they do like the feedback. Like you said, they're not on the ground doing a lot of the work, so they don't know or think about the things that the employees may have. Like a lot of the time, the employees may have really good ideas that they've never thought of.
Absolutely. Oftentimes, yeah, because they're doing the work every day and they've come up with, how can I do this in a way that's going to take less time? Or why are we not collaborating with that other department? And if we had a closer collaboration, things would get done so much more quickly. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And from a leader, how would you foster a supportive workplace culture, and what would that culture look like?
I would start by modeling good work-life balance, going to work at the end of the day on time, not answering emails over the weekends, taking time off, taking care of yourself, and really genuinely encouraging staff to do the same. I think that leaders who convey to their staff that I care about you as a person, like as an employee, I care about what you bring to this company or this organization. I know that you're a human doing this work, not just a cog in the wheel, and really convey that through words, but also through their actions. People can say many things and they're just hollow words, but when really through their actions, they do that. And that includes things like, let's say you do have an employee survey, you take that feedback and you take action. You're like, hey, employees, you said you wanted X, Y, and Z, and we've done that. That is one of the strongest signals an organization can send to its staff, that they care about them, that they value them, that they want their input, versus thank you for taking the survey. We don't know where the data is going. We're not going to do anything with it. So I think that's something leaders can do too. And that can even just be not just a formal survey, but just talking with staff in their organization and, what makes your work day really great? What makes it harder? Are there things that we as leaders can be doing to change that? And really just having that visibility as a leader and really demonstrating a commitment, I guess, to making the workplace as wonderful as it can be for staff really helps retain staff. And like you said, turnover is so expensive to organizations, so it really benefits them to keep their staff, especially their good staff.
Yeah,
most staff are good. Are good, so we want to keep them. And
yeah, I think as well, obviously putting into place the feedback if they can, but also acknowledging that they've read all the feedback, because I feel like if employees are doing these surveys, especially for big organizations, and they never know if anyone's actually sitting behind the computer reading all that feedback, their incentive to fill out future surveys is going to be quite low. But if from a personal view, someone actually comes to your office and is like, hey, like I've actually sat down over days and read all the feedback, so we are taking on board what you've said, I think it just makes employees go like, oh, okay, so it's not just like wasted.
I would completely agree with that. And I think that leaders sometimes feel nervous about soliciting feedback because they may be told about a concern that they can't change. And I would encourage leaders to recognize that anxiety, but still ask for that feedback. And it's okay to say, you know what, that is something that's unfortunately not within our control. Are there other things that we can do? And just owning that versus pretending that feedback was never given. So absolutely. So taking action on the things you can and saying like, this is, and also adding this is why we can't do it. There's a national policy, or there's a law in place that prevents us from having hot tubs in the break room or whatever it is, this is the why behind it. And we appreciate your feedback. We appreciate you took the time to take the survey.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people need the why and the understanding, and then they can, I guess, process the information a lot better than just being told no and being like, okay. But are they saying no because they don't want to, or like they don't like us, or is it actually like a reason that they can't?
Totally. If it's accompanied by a why, you may not like the why, but you're like, it's not arbitrary. Yeah. It's not that they just like made an arbitrary decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any final insights or advice for listeners navigating burnout or striving to create positive change at work or in their personal life?
I would ask yourself what might be contributing to your burnout, and are there changes you can make? Is it that you're someone who takes on so much and you don't cut yourself some slack and like offload and delegate? Is it the work situation you're in, and maybe it's time to explore other maybe positions within the organization or just leaving the organization. So just having those honest conversations with yourself, despite how vulnerable it can feel and how scary it can feel, to say, like, what is truly contributing to my burnout, and what are the things within my sphere of control? What are the decisions I can make to really change the amount of burnout I'm experiencing?
Yeah, I think it can be easier as well to push it down and ignore it, but there will come a time where you do have to address it.
Definitely. It'll pop up at some point or another and potentially be much harder to deal with at that point.
Yeah. And a lot of the times when you make the change, it's always like, oh, why didn't I do this earlier? Awesome. Well, we're just going to go to our final 2 questions. So the first one is, if you could go back and give yourself one sentence of advice at your lowest point, what would it be?
There is hope and joy on the other side of that fear you're feeling.
Short and sweet. That's really nice. I think that's a very helpful one, because fear is in everyone's life in some form. And then looking back on your journey now, is there anything you can smile or laugh about?
I think I laugh in kind of a sardonic way about just how much pressure I've put on myself in my life to get things right. And I think that really has driven a lot of my burnout, in terms of just having expectations that are unreasonable that I would never have on anybody else. So I look back and I kind of chuckle, and I'm like, I need to not be so hard on myself. And I am getting better at it. I am in a place where I can step back and be like, okay, I need to like ratchet it down a bit. But I just chuckle sometimes, and I'm like, what was I thinking? So, and I'm sure 10 years from now, I'll be chuckling at where I am right now and being like, you're still doing it.
Yeah. Is there ways that you can work on not being so hard on yourself? Because I think it's common for quite a few people.
Yeah, the thing I ask myself is, would I be this hard on my husband? Would I be this hard on my loved ones? And if I'm like, no, and I'm like, but my expectations for myself are higher. And I think I've just gotten to a point in my life where I'm like, that is not benefiting me at all. Like, it's just wearing me out. And if I spend more time just doing the best I can and being satisfied with that, what I've found is that, like, I actually work pretty hard. So my like good enough is actually pretty good. So just taking the pressure off myself. But I think it's a lot of like internal cheerleading of like, it's okay if you don't get it right. You're going to learn something anyways. And so I think it's just that internal leadership or cheerleading, excuse me. And then also recognizing that I have this kind of double standard for myself and others, and being like, that's just silly.
Yeah. And vice versa, the standard they have of you is probably nowhere near what you're holding yourself up to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thanks so much for joining today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say, if you or anyone you know has a story to share, please reach out so that I can keep bringing you stories from our community. Let's get as many voices heard as possible. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, review, and follow. Thanks, everyone.